my family on the power side, they all came from what's the name of the place? Ballinacree. Area, right? And my grandfather fought in World War One. So my grandmother came from North Kilkenny place just beside Ballycallan. And the story is that she came down with Bartons. An awful lot of Slieverue people will actually remember Bartons, but they were in Charlestown House at that time. And my grandmother came down with them. She was the cook. And I think my grandfather must have been doing a line or something with her, because he was actually wounded in the Somme, and he was only back. He was honourably discharged in 1917, and when he came back, he got married within I think it was about 2 months, 3 months. So it was a kind of a love story, and because he couldn't work then, he drove steam engines for powers down in Ballymountain. An awful lot of people will know those as well. But he also worked for Reagan's, and he bought Charlestown House after Barton's. Okay, so he then moved to work with Reagan up in Drumdowney. So as a result, some of my uncles were born in Charlestown. My mother was born in Drumdowney, and they all ended up living in a tiny little house in the milepost, and it's still there, believe it or not. It's tiny little house. It had a clay floor, and they then got the houses in Slieverue, and they got number one, and that's where they all ended up in number one, Slieverue. On the other side, the Grant side, the Grants side of it, the Grants came from a place called River Quarter in Mooncoin, and they married into the my great grandfather married into the Fitzgeralds. Now, in Luffney at that particular time, Luffney Patrick, there was something like 20 families of Fitzgeralds, and I don't think there's any Fitzgeralds left in Slieverue. I think the only Fitzgerald that I would know of, and people would know him well, is Jimmy Fitz. He used to work in Stapleton's, and of course there'd be Nicky Fitz, works in the SB. But after that, the actual name Fitzgerald. Well, of course I'm wrong. There was Maple Fitzgerald and her sister, who would be. You interviewed Michael Welch's mother, Maple Fitzgerald. Anyway, that's moving away completely from the Grants. But what happened there is one of the Grants married my grandmother Katie Den. Now Katie Den lived in Carriganura, just under Carriganura Rock, and my grandfather died when I think my father was about 8 or 9, and all the rest of them were all younger, and but she was a kind of a character, and it was a fantastic place for music and dances and all that kind of stuff. And that's where my father played. He played at platforms and all that kind of a thing, and himself and I suppose who else would have been playing with him? Or Morris Henneberry, believe it or not, who would have been Gilbert O'Sullivan's, I think, granduncle. And there was also Mick Gann, and there was others, but they all played at the old platforms, which of course were all banned by the Catholic Church at that particular time. And my father was a kind of a staunch Catholic, but never stopped him doing that. But
and why was it banned? What's wrong with
at that particular time, the reason given is that the parochial halls were all owned by the bishop, the church, so they didn't want these field dances out in the middle of fields and all that kind of stuff, because all kinds of things could happen, and did, and they probably didn't have the control, and I think that was one of the main reasons. But the people were called off of the altar and all that. Actually, I think my mother was at one stage. So but
and what year
again,
would that be?
oh, that would have been in the 40s. No, my father was playing at platforms up to the 50s, the 60s even, and he loved it. He played the fiddle, and my mother played the accordion from time to time, and often I can remember our house at home. Most Saturday nights, they'd be friends of my father's and mother's, and that they'd come to the house, and my father would be playing the fiddle. My mother would probably play the box, and they'd maybe somebody dance a few jigs and that kind of stuff, and they'd be telling stories about the Mulnavat Dag and all these kind of things, but sure, it was a wonderful time, I suppose. Maybe not as wonderful as what's the book, Mum Taylor, to school through the fields, which I always thought was just the greatest load of rubbish, but I think it was just pure nostalgia.
So is this obviously where you got your love for music from?
Oh, without a doubt, without any doubt whatsoever, yeah, absolutely.
You didn't really gravitate to the Irish music, did you?
Absolutely. I started playing the fiddle.
Okay.
When I was about 6, 7, around that age, and you'd be tapping at other things as well, the accordion and mouth organs and all those kind of things. But I remember then, what I had been about 12, and along came Elvis Presley, and along came all those people, and it just was not fashionable to be playing a fiddle, of all things, So my mother, I remember going to Claus Cantwell's and buying a guitar. It cost £6, and she had to pay for it weekly, and that was the first guitar I ever had, and I actually still have it, believe it or not. It was probably made from chipboard, I think, but
and did you teach yourself how to play
yeah,
guitar?
I never got lessons ever in my life, ever. Now, there's an awful lot of people who would probably say I should have, but I didn't, no. And so we're actually after moving off completely off of where we.
Okay, well, let's go back. And where did you went to primary school then?
Oh, Ringville.
Okay.
Ringville. I started in the old school in Ringville. Not a wonderful experience for me. For an awful lot of us, I see that. Then we went to the new Ringville school. Oh, I don't know. What year was it? 1960. what year would it have been? To be about 1968. I'm not sure. Third class anyway. We moved to the new school, and sure, it was such a wonderful place. Like by comparison to where we were. When I went to Ringville School first, it was dry toilets. We didn't have any water. We had to go to the well for the water in the, boil it in the kettle. We used to have cocoa, never tea or anything like that. It was always cocoa. I have no idea why. And of course we did all walk to school. So that's why my memories of to school through the fields and Alice Taylor's completely different. I saw a totally different side to it, I mean, she saw nothing but primroses and the wonderfulness of Uncle Jack, and they were all so beautiful. I don't know. I never saw any of that, Maybe it's me.
And was there no school in Slieverue itself at that stage?
The two new schools opened at exactly the same time. And they were blessed, of course, by the bishop at the same time, and all that. We have photos. I have photos there now. I can give you those.
But because you've been going to Ringville, you stayed on going to Ringville, is it?
Well, yeah, we went to Ringville to 6th class, and then some people went to secondary school in Waterford, and I went to the Tech in Slieverue, which was the most wonderful school, and I swear on that, And we had the headmaster there was Christy Fiore. I don't know, has anybody else been talking about Christy Fiore, but he was a wonderful man, along with others, Jim Welsh and others, But I always felt we got a fantastic education in the place, because it was so liberal for what year, 1969 or so, or whatever year it was, It was a fantastic place because it was way ahead of its time, and I always felt we got a fantastic education, totally different to what my other people were talking about the De La Salle and place like that. Not saying there's anything wrong with the De La Salle or anything like that, but I'm just saying for that particular time, it was great. Christy Fiore, you wouldn't get anything like him. I mean, he was just amazing. He used to come into the class always with big long ash. I think he used to smoke carols, but he used to teach. When he was teaching, he used to teach mechanical drawing, and he'd come over behind you, and he'd be pointing this and that out to you, and the ash would be getting longer and longer, and eventually the ash would fall down, and all over the bloody place, and all he'd do is just wipe it away. So talk about times that were in it, and of course we were all smoking then down behind the old I think it was the science room. Jim Welsh will know it very well. He used to teach us science, but every so often, Christy would come down and he'd take the fags off of us all. Of course, he smoked them all himself, But I know he was a great man, and it was a wonderful place. I always thought it was, and God, that's back in 1969, 70, So that was my education only. And then went into the P&T and all that kind of stuff, and
And did
the
you
rest
have
is absolute history.
Technology.
Oh yeah, of course. I done actually myself and Mac McCarthy, Nola Regan, all the musicians at that particular time, all done the course in ANCO on radio television servicing, and it was a year and a bit, I think, and I done that, and I went from there into the P&T reluctantly, I might add, because I remember my father had a friend who had a friend, and I got the job in the P&T, but that wasn't the cool place to be then. You know, I was after doing radio, television service, and all this kind of stuff. Now it was only black and white television. There was no colour. And remember my father saying, "Telling you, take the job in the P&T. You know, it's a good job, a good pensionable job." And I'm glad to this day that I actually listened to him. You know, but that's a long time ago.
And what did your mum and dad do?
My father worked when he left. Like, they were farmers, okay, but they lost the farm back in 1920-21 due to the fact more that my grandfather died, and my grandmother couldn't keep it. So all of my uncles and aunts, nearly all of them, ended up in England, and that's making a very long story short. And my father then worked, I suppose, for farmers around locally and that kind of stuff. And he was the kind of a fella. He was very, very, very handy with his hands, that kind of thing. He had the first generator in Slieverue, and he was. It was a kind of a windmill, and he was actually generating his own electricity back way before the ESB came, and he worked in, I think, Halligan's, if you can remember that. It was a bicycle shop in Waterford, and he was a bicycle mechanic there for years and years. And he also worked at, I think, in Biddy Griffin's, which would be Betty's sister in Waterford. And then he ended his days working out in Power Seeds. And, you know, he used to cycle from Corrimore out to Power Seeds. And then he had an autocycle, it was called, which was made of bits and pieces of you wouldn't believe it, you know. But he had that for probably 20 years, you know. And then he bought a car. He was in it. I'd say he was in his late 50s, 60s when he bought the car, and my cousin was teaching him how to drive, and the first thing he done was drove out under the car and made bits of the car, but he got it back together again. But my memories of him are when he finally retired. My mother and himself would go to probably Slieverue over to Betty's for, you know, the milk and all that kind of stuff every day. But my mother would sit in the what do you call it side, the passenger side, and she operated the choke by pulling it. It was a Mini, by the way. She'd keep that choke out, and she put an actual clothespin in to keep it out, right? And he would light the pipe straight away, okay? And you know the windows were actually slide windows, so he actually looked out the side window going along. You know how they survived is beyond me. Now, of course, this was again now the 70s, that kind of stuff. There wouldn't have been many cars. If they had been many cars on the road, you know, they were dead. There's no question in the wide earthly world. He was one of the worst drivers that I ever came across. But I'm probably not an awful lot better myself, according to Catherine. But yeah.
And come here, do you know EIGSE Slieverue?
Yes.
What's your earliest memory of that?
My earliest memory of that is the ferry here, just literally there, the road down the road. The ferry in Ballinlaw pub. I remember on the very first EIGSE, I think it was, for some reason we all ended up there, and who was there was Kieran McMahon, Richard Welsh, Dr. Richard Welsh, Michael's uncle, Donald Foley, and some other lovely people. But I remember I lived at that stage up at the very top of the hill, right beside Ringville School, and I can honestly say no one remembers getting up that hill because like it was pure insanity. But that was different days again, you know.
And
That's 40 years ago now, sure, isn't it?
yeah,
You know.
is it Richard Walsh we were talking about there?
Yes, Dick.
Yeah,
Dick Welsh.
Was he in some photographs recently where
I put him up myself on no I didn't put him up. It was the commission.
Yes.
The what do you call it, commission?
it's not Conrad Gaeilge.
No. The folklore
Yes,
commission.
folklore
It's now called something else. Dukish, is it?
Yeah, Dukes.
Yeah, and somebody had it up, but every picture, Dick Welch was in it. So I said, look at
And he
he
was
being
a
a
linguist.
Slieverue man. I wanted everyone to know that.
He was
you
a
know.
linguist.
He was an absolute genius of a man. You know, he wrote a couple of books on ring, of course. And of course Donald Foley wrote the Three Villages. I'm sure you probably heard about that, you know, which was Ring, London, and Slieverue. You know, people say Ferrybank, but it was actually Slieverue Ferrybank, because at that particular time, Ferrybank, Slieverue were the same parish, you know. So great book
But
as well.
very academic people, weren't they?
Incredible people, and you know, like Dick Welch was way ahead of his time. I don't quote me, but he was he taught in UCD. I'm nearly sure. We need to look up now what he taught,
Yeah.
but it's on the website because I have it on
And how did you roped into that? Was that
Slieverue.com.
because of music then?
Which
That, you know, when
EIGSE,
yeah.
yes. In the beginning, we always provided music, and we had a lot of different bands. The Sands came down one time, and we used to have sessions and all kinds of things, you know. We actually still do. Like, we've played for EIGSE, you know, probably more than anybody else, you know, over the last 40 years. And I must say, I always, you know, like EIGSE is a you know, it's a very special thing for a parish like Slieverue, because like we do have an amazing history here. It's I know we keep hearing about the boundary the whole time, and about how important that is, and to an awful lot of Slieverue people it is extremely important. But my kind of thinking on it is like Slieverue, Waterford area. If you look at the old map, 17 scales in Richard, isn't it 1780? I think like Slieverue and Waterford were exactly the same. You know, they were like Snow Hill is on it, was Snow Haven then, etc. But the actual area was also known as Cumar Trí Nishke, which is the meeting of the three waters. So like, you know, like Waterford City was at one side of the river. Slieverue basically was at the other side of the river, and I mean they had to be a interaction there. So like to kind of say that we are more, I get killed for saying this, that we're more Kilkenny than Waterford. Sure, I mean we just can't be saying that, you know. But however, I have 3 sons who are probably going to shoot me.
Well, I see the GA comes into it.
The GA comes into it, and of course it does, because again, the Slieverue GA club is one of the oldest in Kilkenny, and they started off, of course, playing football. You probably have to get all this from Jim and all this, but you know, they're very proud of that, and I can understand it. I can really understand it, because I know that when Ferrybank decided to move to Waterford back in the 40s, was it? Whenever. You know, I mean, there's still an awful lot of people there still,
But
who
I'm amazed.
are Kilkenny supporters, and you know,
But it is amazing to see how close you are from Ballinlaw, like from the ferry, the old ferry,
yeah.
to Waterford City. Like
Oh, sure.
by water, it's so
Oh,
close.
by water, you're there in no time at all. And you know, let's be honest about it. Like 90% of us work there, whether we like it or not. So how do you get around all that?
Politics. I mean, Slieverue had a bit of a radical reputation for a
Oh,
while.
very much so. Yeah. Well, certainly on leaning towards the left.
Well, and also Republican. We say the Workers' Party.
Oh, well, it did.
Sure.
Well, I know Workers' Party, an awful lot more than Republican.
Okay.
You know, I would never say like Slieverue was that Republican now, but no, the Workers' Party, through Sean Welch, who was a Waterford man, of course, had a big influence on certainly our age group, and yeah, absolutely, you know. But again, like that's history, you know.
And then people like Mick Forrestal, who had just an amazing collection of songs over the years.
Incredible, still does,
Yeah.
you know.
And he was like an encyclopedia, wasn't he, really?
Absolutely, he still is,
Yeah.
you know. Hasn't changed one bit in all the years, but no, he was always a great lover of songs. Didn't make any difference whether they were Irish, English, Scots. Makes no difference whatsoever to him, and I think that's, you know, the way it actually should be, you know. But oh, he has an amazing collection of songs, you know, especially like back in the 70s and 80s. Like, he certainly collected some wonderful songs, you know, especially from Frank Hart in Dublin and people like that. He had an awful lot of his songs, and sure, Mick, you could talk about Mick forever, you know.
And you mentioned Snow Hill and, you know, all those. I mean, there was quite a few big houses in this area originally.
Incredible, but I suppose that had obviously to do with the fact that we were so close to the actual city. You know, again, like, we're literally across the river. Oh, there were some fantastic houses. Snow Hill. You had Snow Hill, Bellevue, Prospect House, Mount Prospect, Snow Haven. And I know
Belmont.
I'm missing it. Of course, Belmont was one of the fantastic houses. Yeah, the Barns, and you know, wonderful. And it's a shame. Like, Belmont is probably one of the only ones left, for what's left of it. Bellevue and Snow Hill were amazing houses, you know, and they're not even a wall left. Prospect House, the last people there were Mulligans, and that was the Andersons, of course, and the same people as out in Grace Dew on the Tremor Road.
And what was the attitude to the big houses? Like, the people.
Well, again, I think, like, I'd leave that to that interview I done with Danny Dowling a long time ago now, with Paddy Burke and Paddy Burke and his wife Bridie was the actual teacher here, and we done an interview with her when she was 90, and I suppose he wasn't far off it, but he worked in the houses, you know, and he hadn't one bad word to say about anyone, the Powers or anyone, you know. So I you know, you should use some of that, you know, because I think it would certainly educate people on the big houses because it's a fascinating subject, you know. I think Dermot Power wrote book, has a book, hasn't he, on the powers of I think it's fate like or
Mm.
I'm not sure now.
Okay.
We better check that before
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it's where we're actually situated, you know.
And then
Bellevue House, of course, was an amazing house as well. That was Richard Shield, and after that it was Powers, and so it's amazing that they were all Catholic. Well, except the Andersons, of course, weren't, but they were all Catholic, and the Powers in Bellevue used to cross the river over to Fate Lake, to the church in Fate Lake every Sunday, you know. So
to go to service.
service, yeah. No, there was a church in Snow Hill, and you know, my mother and all those people all remember, you know, going to mass there. So, but there's not a shred of it left. Not a shred of Snow Hill left. You know, just in some ways you ask the question, how did that happen? You know, because when you see photos of they were magnificent buildings. They were, and of course there's a, you know, there's so many histories that have been actually written on the Powers, as you know, especially the Powers now. The Snows built it, and they built the church in Slieverue as well, and that's why it is actually called Snow Hill to this day. So the big houses now. Jim Welch is your man. Jim done an awful lot of research on it, and it's a fascinating subject, sure. You know.
And you remember the story about the unfortunate poor girl that died on the way back from the dance?
Oh, you mean Lady Esmond?
Yes.
Uh,
They're neighbours here, wasn't it?
just literally, you can actually see the house out the window. Ringville House. Making a very, 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 very long story short on that. Have you been told this already? This story, because I'm not 100% sure on it. To be good if you get a chance to get Jim maybe to tell you. But basically speaking, they adopted this girl. And a very long story short, because I'm afraid to tell you the long one because I'd probably tell you wrong. But they attended a ball in Waterford, I think it was, and on the way home, she died. Now they reckon the reason was that she was actually poisoned, and I thought, yeah, close that door.
Okay, can you get that door? Yeah.
But they reckon she was actually poisoned, and of course it had to do with who the place was going to be left to, and etc. 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 But Lady Esmond herself was a wonderful woman, and she built she built the old school, or original Ringville School, which was down the lane, the Castle Lane, and then in the 1880s she built the one that I went to, the old Ringville School, and she, what was it? Oh yeah, she always funded footwear for the children, and I think up to, you know, now even I think it's still there someplace that yeah, you know, I think it was something like for all time, she, you know, they'd be okay, but again, she was Catholic as well, you know, so there's a kind of a an awful lot of people think that, you know, those big landlords, or whatever you want to call them, landowners, were all Protestant, and certainly here, that wouldn't be the case, you know. So.
And then obviously this area had a huge connection down with Clover Meats, and more recent.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Now, the guy to you've been actually talking to Michael Griffin, have you? Michael is your man. He'll tell you the story about Clover Meats. He worked there, and he could write the books on it. But yeah, of course it did. And even a lot of the people that moved into the bullring, into you know, the actual village, most of those worked in Clover over the years. And sure, it was fantastic employment, you know.
What do you mean the bullring? Where was the bullring?
No, the bullring. It's only called the bullring because of the shape of it.
Right.
If you look at Slieverue village, it goes around like a keyhole, you know. So, Jesus. But the top of it, I don't know if this. But the top of it, it's actually shaped like a keyhole. If you come around and there's a big round where you can turn your car and come back up, and right there was always called the bull ring. I have no idea. I wouldn't say there was ever a bull in it or a cow in it or anything in it ever, but it's always the bull ring. And when we were all young, we all played football and everything down there, you know. Totally different times.
And speaking of which, where would you have gone when you were kids? How far would you have gone off, like we say, on walking or on bicycles?
Sure. Look. Well, in my case, I was always kind of drawn between my grandmother's, which was in Slieverue, and our own house, which is in Corramore. And I was always drawn between the two, and I probably had more friends in Slieverue village than I ever had here. But where would you play? I certainly spent more time up on Carriganora Rock and all that. You know, standard cowboys. Sure, where would you get the likes of it? And it was wonderful. And
was the cross there at that stage?
The cross was there then. Yeah. I think the cross was there in 1951 or 2. But anyway, yeah, and in Slieverue then, of course, we used to go down Lynch's Bogs and smoking, of course. As I said now, I was never really one for the kind of football and that kind of stuff, but sure, I played it anyway.
Or would you go as far as Tory Hill?
I was only Tory Hill was a long way away, you see, but we would often cycle over there. You know, we'd go over to Curran's shop and Tory Hill down. That'd be a big outing.
What about then over to, what do you call the place on the way out to Tory Hill? Where the pub is, what do you call it? The Shanty.
Oh, the Shanty.
That area.
Yeah, well, you see, there was rarely, but of course, at that stage, the Shanty wouldn't have been the pub. The pub then would have been Psyche Powers pub, and which was again a shebeen. Sure, in actual fact, most of the pubs even that we have now started out shebeens. In actual fact, my grandmother's house was an actual shebeen back in the 1800s, and that's why you see it was on the main Ross, well, the main Glenmore Slieverue Road, and that's why people used to just call, you know, in those days people used to just call in and they'd get the tea and the dinner and all those kind of things. And as I said already, you know, the dances, like that's where it all happened, you know. And
would you have gone swimming down this end down here?
Not at all. No, I'd say no one no one could actually. I learned to swim when I was in my 30s. You know, no, swimming was a. Sure, look, we only got to Tramore probably on the 15th of August. You know, if we were lucky, and you know, no, we were always country boys.
But you wouldn't be messing with boats.
Oh, I'll tell you, if there was here, say, or like I've been told by different people that the amount of fishing on the actual river was amazing. You know, like, but sure, you can see nobody at all there now. Not a sinner fishing anymore. But it was extremely popular for, you know, fishing. Among other things, of course, the pub was very popular for other things.
And just to go back right up to today, I mean, there is a whole new generation of young singers, Clean and Mick's daughter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of real talent that's coming up in the area again, isn't there?
Well, Slieverue always had it. I'm not just kind of, you know, saying that, but yes, it did. Oh, there's an awful lot. I mean, my sister Catherine now could tell you more on, but there's an awful lot of young people out there, extremely talented, you know, and yes, Slieverue always had its fair share of, you know. But I suppose every place is the same, you know. But yeah, we always enjoyed a bit of music and all that kind of stuff, you know. But again, it was a lot more popular probably back in my father's time, you know, because again, there was no television and there was no, well, there was radio, of course, like at Lone, wasn't it? And, you know, even to get that in on the medium wave, but yeah, I can remember on Saturdays at home, Dinjo, I think it was, on the radio, you know, and it was the only radio program that had dancing, you know, and of course you could only hear the dancers, you know, clobbery clob, and my father used to be waiting for that to come on, and when that would come on, we'd all sit around the fire and we'd all be listening to the radio, which was up on the wall, you know, and we'd all look at the radio. The same thing used to happen, of course, for what's called matches, you know. I remember well in my grandparents' place, you know, the Powers, because they were all kind of fanatical hurling and that kind of stuff, but they'd all be there, and you know, every score would be written down on the fag box, which was a gold, I don't know, Afton, was it, or Sweet Afton or Gold Flake, and players and all those kinds of, and they took it so serious. I remember when you know, you'd be a child, if you opened your mouth during a match, me all over here like was God, and sitting down watching the radio, you know, everyone looking at this radio and the cursing and the swearing that we go on, you know, but fantastic show, wasn't it? You know, but of course, like that, there was no television. I honestly believe people were a lot closer, and you know, I don't know, was it Patrick Habner, I think, said, you know, the man who knows his own half acre knows the world. Not it, but he was big into parochialism, and there's a lot to be said for it, you know. There is an awful lot to be said for it. We were only talking before you came in about funerals, Irish, you know, funerals. I mean, we definitely love a good funeral. You know, there's nothing like it. You know, and it's unique to Ireland. There's no question whatsoever about that. You know, but it is a kind of a caring about your neighbour and that, you know, and it is, and I think to be one of the things that I'd certainly hate to see is losing that kind of sense of community and that, you know, and we still have it. You know, contrary to what people think, nothing like probably what it was. You know. But then again, there was the other side of it, the valley, the squinting windows, and all that kind of stuff, and you know.
But with the funerals, do people do the wakes here, or do they?
Oh, absolutely, everybody, sure. I mean, even, yeah, of course they do, yeah. Yeah, sure. Wakes were always classed as very, very, very important, like, and you know, there's an awful lot of people look for and against those kind of things. But I think there's an awful lot to be said for neighbours coming around to the house and sharing in people's grief and whatever, you know. And I don't know. It certainly helps people, I think, you know. But I mean, where would you get it? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people turning up to a funeral, and you know you're there shaking hands with people that you never saw before in your life, you know. But they knew the deceased, or they know an uncle or an aunt or something, you know. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much.
You're welcome. More than welcome.
Yeah, that's all it helps for. And are you okay, Keith? Yeah. So what we need to do is get those.
Now I hope you'll be editing that. Liam actually re-recorded here, and I never said that about any of those, does he?
Well,
the kind of music, the music end of it, you know. Well, what do you want to know?
Well, you toured a long time with Liam Clancy.
I did. I spent all together, I think, 26 years working with him. You know, he was an exceptional man. He was wonderful. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Now, there's an awful lot of people who would disagree, maybe, but I found he was a genius, you know. And I think that's why we got on so well, is that I just admired him so much, you know.
And how did your paths cross?
Our paths crossed down in Ring, of all places, back in the 70s and that kind of time. We almost lived in Ring, you know, Monies, and I can actually. I think you were talking earlier on about pubs and being brought up in pubs, but I can remember in Mooney's pub, Donica Goff, who's he plays with Daniel. Yeah, and but I can remember actually feeding him with a bottle. And I mean, he's 6'6".
A horse of a man.
A horse of a man. And I can actually remember giving him a bottle. But we spent an awful lot of time in Ring. But making a very long story short, Liam used to often come down to sessions in the back room in Monies. And one night we were actually, I was actually playing guitar and he was singing, and later I went into the toilet and he followed me in, and he asked me would I be interested in playing with Make 'em and Clancy at the time. Sure, Jesus, I said to myself, absolutely, you know. So that's where it kind of started, and I played the Make 'em and Clancy were on their final tour, and I done that with them. And after that, then I played with Liam and so on over the years, and Kevin Evans and myself then played with him for a long time, I suppose, you know, until he died, of course. Was 8 years ago now, you know, because he was only 73, you know. Tragic, absolute tragedy. But he you know, when Bob Dylan said, you know, he was the best folk singer in the world, he was right. you know.
And did you meet any of the other Clancy's brothers?
Oh, I did. I would have played with the actual Clancy brothers from time to time as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And over the years, of course, you know, you have opportunities to meet some amazing people. Like I played with Tom Paxton. Good, I remember doing the concert hall with Tom twice. Donovan, of course. You know, over the years, you just meet people and play with them, and you know, it's an absolute honour. You know.
And when you were playing with Liam, how far would you have gotten? Would you play in America with him, or?
I did, of course. Yeah, I played in America. Played here, yeah, Europe, yeah, and I absolutely enjoyed it. Not so much for the actual touring thing, because I never liked traveling. I hate it. But I cannot honestly say this, that any time I ever went on stage with Liam, it was just an absolute honour. Even though, you know, you were doing the same thing probably every night, but he just had an amazing gift that like he could absorb an audience like nobody else. Nobody else could absolutely touch him, you know, because I can honestly say I would have heard the same songs, the same jokes, the same things over and over, and every time you would still laugh, and you would still because you have a different audience, and he you know, he was. I know I go on and on about him, but I couldn't say enough about him, really, you know. But
that's a gift, though, isn't it? To be able to do that. Oh, every night.
he was an exceptionally talented guy, and I suppose you know, it isn't that he was a fantastic singer or a fantastic guitarist, but he could certainly deliver a poem like nobody that I've ever. I mean, just amazing, and one of the things that I suppose I learned, if I learned anything from him, was that, you know, if you do something, you do it with passion, and you know what you're doing, and for instance, like I have probably I get very annoyed, let's say, when people try to you know, they come in here to do a CD, and they give me this CD of the song that they're doing, and they say, this is the one I want to do, and they want to do it exactly the same, and it just annoys me so much. It's one of the things that really gets me, because if they done it without music, or if they done it without, you know, but if they done it with heart, and if they understood the actual song, I go to the end of the earth and I wouldn't mind. But I cannot stand copycat. I just don't get it. I don't see the point. I really and truly, when I hear people singing like Christy Moore, or Ronnie Drew, or some, you know, how often have you heard people singing with Dublin accents? Why? They're not from Dublin. I'm on a hobby horse now, sorry. No, but you know, it's Jesus Christ Almighty tonight. Like, it has nothing whatsoever to do with it. But if you do it with passion, or whatever the word is, you know, you don't have to be a good guitarist. You don't have to be a great singer, but it'll still, you know. Like, one of the things Liam always done is, before we do a new song, we'd spend probably months not practicing or anything, but talking about it maybe, and every time we'd meet, we'd have a go at it, maybe doing it a different way, and I know like Liam would understand every single thing about the song, who wrote it, when he wrote it, how he wrote it, why he wrote it, you know. And I think those things are very, very, very important, you know. I think it's just being creative, call it art, call it whatever you like. I think that's what it's all about. Yes, it's not about money. It's not about. No, I was always glad to playing, you know, in bands as well, like for a couple of bob, you know, because I played in more bands over the years, you know, and I can honestly say, you know, of all the bands that I played in Waterford over the years, you know, wedding bands, that kind of thing, Bob Miller, without any doubt, you know, the most amazing man ever. And I think I wouldn't be the only one, you know, to say that. Like, but he was great. And shameful again, he died so young. You know, he was only 60. You know, and he was just a lovely guy, you know, and an extremely talented guy, you know.
How did you manage, we say, to combine music with your own job and all that?
You don't probably want me to answer that.
Okay, don't answer that.
Jesus, no. I know I'm really
No, but I
tired.
mean, were you ever tempted to say, oh, I'm going to go into music full time?
Never.
Okay.
Never, and I would never have done it. I think full time music is a very hard place to be on, unless you're the big name, the Christy Moore or the Liam Clancy or the whoever, and even at that, it's an extremely hard living. You know, I mean, I see people now, you're friends of mine, who at 70 years of age are still getting in cars in Oma and places like that, and driving down to Ross or Rosslare or whatever for very little money. And you know, and you say to yourself, Jesus, that's hard going, you know. So I always felt I was extremely lucky to have had both worlds, and I enjoyed both.
So your father was right then?
My father was so right. Unbelievable. I know it's not a very popular thing maybe to say that a pension, you know, Liam Clancy used to say this fucking pension, you know, and he used to equate it to this wall off in a distance, and you know, the pension was at the other side of the wall, and that's all you ever worked for. And he's probably right to a point, you know. But not what to be said for it now, I can tell you. That I'm retired and, you know. But I still wouldn't pack up the whole music thing for anything, you know. I mean, I love it, and I always did, you know.
It probably keeps you sane as well, does it?
Well, there's an awful lot of people who would kind of debate that.
Or keep you insane? Maybe.
Well, my father always reckoned that most kind of arty people were all mad. I think he was so right. Honestly, I do, you know. I think you have to be a little bit. You can't take things too serious, and you can't be, you know. But one thing you do have to have is you have to have enough love for it, and if you have that, sure, it's not a job, you know. But it can become a job. It can become like, you know, where's the next few bob going to come from if you're, you know, full time in any, you know, form of art, you know. So you know better than anyone, you know. I mean, it's a dodgy place, you know. And I admire people so much, you know, who have given their whole lives to music or whatever, you know. So now.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Juan. How are we doing?
Brilliant timing.